do you really think they're all so stupid? Is that really your theory about why Trump was elected? And the whole Marr phenomena is quite interesting because he interviewed Ben Shapiro a while after that and, took everyone, including Shapiro, to task for the absolute stupidity of the catastrophe of Trump without ever reflecting on the fact that clearly in the United States, the liberal left lost the election. Trump didn't win. Everyone thought Hillary was going to win. She had it in the bag. And if she wouldn't have played identity politics, she only needed 70,000 additional votes. If she wouldn't have played identity politics, she would have won. And Marr, when he
been spending some time together recently on stage talking, among other things, about God. But today, I wondered if we could pivot to politics, and to one thing in particular which has been on my mind, and which I know has been on your mind, which is the issue of where politics goes wrong, where the right goes wrong in politics, and where the left goes wrong in politics. We should probably start with the right, but we can see some of that more clearly. The cliff edge is more vertiginous, it seems. What are your thoughts on that currently, of where the right of politics gets to go wrong?
Well, I think that we have been able to box in the more unfortunate elements of the right. And that's probably a consequence mostly of moral deliberations undertaken after World War II. So we've seemed to have come to a pretty general consensus, I would say, that claims of ethnic or racial superiority place you outside the realm of acceptable political discourse. That's that cliff place where dialogue degenerates into conflict, inevitably. I think the right, the classic errors of the right are to fail to attend sufficiently to the tendency for hierarchies to degenerate into corruption because of willful blindness and rigidity. And of course, that's something that the left takes the right to task for, generally speaking. So there's the hard line, which is ethnic identity as a mark of superiority, and then there's a looser line where there's also error. I think the right errs in the same way that the left does when they play identity politics. So, generally the way that we're conceptualizing the political landscape is right to left as a distribution. But there's another axis, which is probably collectivist versus individualist. And there's collectivist left-wingers and there's collectivist right-wingers. And insofar as the left-wingers and the right-wingers are collectivist, then they're wrong. And you see that on the right with their claims of ethnic and national superiority, say.
Do you hear some of that coming back more? Or?
I don't know. The thing is, there's a lot of noise in the press, especially on the left, especially as you move towards the radical left, about the alt-right. But I have a hard time putting my finger on exactly who these alt-right people are. If you look at the radical left, it's obvious that they have a stranglehold, I would say, on the universities, especially the humanities and social sciences, and that one of the consequences of that is that the doctrine that those entities has been producing is spilling over into society to a large degree. And there's a lot of noise about the alt-right, but I can't figure out who the alt-right people are.
Has anyone met them?
Well, what happens in the United States, I think, is that anything that smacks of support for Trump is immediately associated with the alt-right. But the situation in the United States is way more complicated than that, because the Americans have been split 50% Democrat and 50% Republican, like as close to 50% as it can possibly be, for 4 decades. And so I don't see that the election of Trump indicates the rise of something approximating even right-wing populism in the United States. It's more complicated in Europe because the border and immigration issues are much hotter topics in Europe. And I do think that it seems to me that there is a rise of ethno-nationalist parties on the farther reaches of the right in
Something
Europe.
like that, yeah.
Yeah, but it's so difficult to get accurate information now, perversely enough, that it's very difficult to evaluate.
One of the strange things about the whole alt-right thing is the extent to which it's a way to avoid facing up to the reality that half the country voted for Donald Trump. It seems to be some kind of coping mechanism. And I noticed a little while ago when you were doing Bill Maher's show, you mentioned when you got onto the panel bed that perhaps you went down a level underneath the one that the panel wanted to talk about, which was just riffing on the awfulness of Donald Trump. And I think you rightly pointed out that we can all play the game of who can be rudest about Donald Trump, but you tried to go down to the level of what would you do if you took the president away from the people who voted for him by indictment or whatever it would be, whatever the mechanism. And they seemed utterly baffled by your question.
Well, they were
Wow, wow, wow. What an unbelievable treat, folks, to find this video. I think it's a podcast that Douglas Murray is doing. It's called Unheard. Anyways, it was about an hour long. We're going to chop it up into a few segments over here. But to hear Jordan Peterson and Douglas Murray just converse, oh my God. It's like political orgasm for those of us on the right. You know what I'm talking about? But I put a couple of points down that I just want to sort of go over. Jordan Peterson, we'll get to his response to Douglas Murray's question of what happened when Jordan Peterson, that viral moment when he was on Bill Maher. But he talks about this alt-right versus the radical left. Who are these people? And that's true. I mean, they'll paint anybody on the alt-right. I mean, according to the Democrats, according to liberals and leftists, I would be alt-right. I would be a white supremacist because I don't conform to their identity politics of that. I probably should be voting and agreeing with everything that the left and liberals and progressives talk about. That's never going to happen. But you can always identify who the alt-left is. As we talked about, it's the Google alphabet networks, right? Basically, mainstream media. The people in academia, the universities, colleges, the professors, all of those. The DEI institutes, the diversity, equality, inclusion, which actually should be diversity, inclusion, equity, die. So DEI should die, those kind of people. Corporations, these are the people that are at the hierarchy at the human resource centers. These are the people, that you can certainly identify, as a radical left. And then immediately, like he was saying, you're a Trump voter, alt-right, you're a white supremacist, even though, 12% African-American vote, so there must be white supremacists, 34 to 35% Hispanic Latino vote going to Donald Trump. Those guys are white supremacists. About, I think it was 12 to 15% Muslim vote went to Donald Trump. Oh, they're certainly white supremacists there. Them Muslims, they're certainly Muslims. They're certainly, white supremacists. I mean, it goes on and on and on. I just want to ask, those 200 counties that went for Obama and then they completely flipped for Trump in 2016. So were they white supremacists when they voted for Obama and then they became even more white supremacists for Donald Trump? Just asking the question here. Just asking the question. Anyways, this is what we have on tap for you today, folks. More of Jordan Peterson and Douglas Murray coming up. You're watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I'm your host, Dr. Nasir, where I give you my political prescription from my political perspective on what's happening out there when all these things collide in our world. Douglas Murray, Jordan Peterson, social strife. You've got religion, politics, culture, government, policies, all of them come crashing together. Anyways, folks, let's get back to the interview with these two great minds. We'll do that right now.
Tried to go down to the level of what would you do if you took the president away from the people who voted for him by indictment or whatever it would be, whatever the mechanism. And they seemed utterly baffled by your question.
Well, they were stunned at the fact that someone would pose that question. I mean, I sat there and I thought about that for a long time, whether I would ask that question, because I knew I was jumping out of the game that they were all playing. It's like, well, you have to live with these people. And do you really think they're all so stupid? Is that really your theory about why Trump was elected? And the whole Marr phenomena is quite interesting, because he interviewed Ben Shapiro a while after that, and took everyone, including Shapiro, to task for the absolute stupidity of the catastrophe of Trump, without ever reflecting on the fact that clearly in the United States, the liberal left lost the election. Trump didn't win. Everyone thought Hillary was going to win. She had it in the bag. And if she wouldn't have played identity politics, she only needed 70,000 additional votes. If she wouldn't have played identity politics, she would have won. And Marr, when he went after Shapiro, took no responsibility whatsoever of the failures of the liberal left. It was all, well, the stupidity of the people who voted for Trump. And my sense, because I've talked to many, many people who voted for Trump, is that it isn't like people on the center right and the right, the Republican end of the distribution, were overwhelmingly impressed with what Trump had to offer. But they were willing to take, that was the risk that they were willing to take. And it was partly because they're so disenfranchised by the identity politics that the Democrats have descended into. And they have nothing else to offer the Democrats. It's identity politics or nothing.
Do you think, because to an extent, I mean, the Trump Brexit phenomenon is often uncomfortably put together. There are lots of things that make them different, but one of the things that makes them similar is this attempt by people to push away any attempt to explain what has happened, to come up with reason after reason other than the possibility that half of the people have a different view of politics. And there seems to be some kind of coping mechanism going on that to keep pushing away that realization that your own side has got some fundamental misunderstanding.
Yeah,
of the general
well, it's
public's
easier.
wishes.
And I think it's very easy for people who don't want to evaluate their own beliefs to assume that everything that the other side is saying is a consequence of their personal moral failings and their ignorance and their malevolence, basically. And it's not helpful. Especially, it's not helpful. I particularly think it's unhelpful in the United States, because it isn't obvious to me that the underlying dynamic has really changed that much, given that it's been 50-50 for 20 years, and it was 50-50 in the last election. So the alt-right may be very, very hard to pin down or find, and anyone who would be a member of it would be able to get a lot of publicity, and sort of has in some ways. And a couple of people who you'd identify have never had more coverage than they have by being identified in this way. But I sense that there's something, there are things that are murmuring under the discussion on the right. It seems to me that me at any rate, very, very uncomfortable, very worried. And the one that I started to notice a little while ago was probably in the last year or so. It was the increase of people, Q&A, sometimes, meet and greet sort of things after speeches, where I found that almost always there was at least one person who asked me about IQ. Mm-hmm. Now that had never happened until about a year or two ago. I never got asked about that. For a long time I sort of said, it's not my thing, I don't know about it, I don't, that's why I haven't discussed it. But there was always this sort of thing of, you should look into it, and I could never quite put my finger on why I was uncomfortable about it, other than the fact that I knew that somebody who raised it first was somebody I was innately suspicious of. Well, there is a danger on the right, that the identity politics danger, because the right will play identity politics different than the left. The leftist theory is, well, we should all segregate ourselves into our identity groups, and then those who are the oppressor groups should repent and feel terrible for their oppressive acts and step aside. And that's one way of playing identity politics. But another way of playing identity politics is, to hell with you. I will pick my identity group based on race or ethnicity, whatever it is that I feel most comfortable with, since that's the game, and then I'll play to win. And my sense is that there will be plenty of people attracted to the identity politics game that you win. And the people who've gone after me from the right wing have basically gone after me for exactly that reason. They say Peterson stresses individuality and individual responsibility, but fails entirely to appreciate the fact that we do manifest ourselves in groups, which is exactly the same thing that the radical leftists argue, and that it's necessary for those of us who wish to preserve our culture, etc., to group together in our homogenous group and act collectively to, what would you say, take our territory back, something like that. And that's very much a fascist perspective, fundamentally. But it's if the fundamental game is identity politics, it isn't obvious why the logical choice is to lose. So now, when I discuss this, I tell people that the whole idea that you should view the world lens that makes your collective identity paramount is a pathological game, no matter who's playing it, because it produces a reversion to divisive tribalism, and small, diverse tribes of people mostly fight.
So Jordan certainly has a different perspective on how Trump won. He basically is saying is that he didn't win, Hillary lost. And I have a fundamental disagreement with Jordan on this, primarily because I am a Donald Trump supporter, always have been, always will be. Voted for him twice, going to vote for him again 3 times. And I think that he was one of the greatest presidents out there. And I think he actually won the election. Jordan Peterson is saying that because of identity politics. Now, you want to call it whatever. Did she make some mistakes? She did. Just because the polling was out there, and you know who the polls were being driven by mainstream media, that underlying Trump vote was there. I keep going back to the fact that you had 200 counties in America that went double-digit wins, double-digit points for Barack Obama. And those same 200 counties flipped 20 points. That's a 40-point swing in Trump's favor. And that's what won him the election. And these were the same people. These are what we called your Reagan Democrats. So when they vote for Democrats, then there's no delineation between, now they're not college educated, high school. They're just good, hardworking, down to earth, middle class Americans voting for, Clinton, voting for the Democrats, voting for Obama. But as soon as these same people, these same towns, same counties, as soon as they decide to flip the script and vote for somebody Republican, now they're racist. And now they start breaking them down into, oh, these were only high school educated, so they're really racist. And then the ones that are college educated that voted Republican, oh, they're racist too, but they're just stupid. Or they don't know anything. That's what basically it boils down to. So I seriously have a complete difference of opinion than Jordan Peterson on the election of Trump. But then I am an American and he's Canadian, so I think I know a little bit more about the political nature of what was going on over here than Jordan does. But anyways, he's got his opinion, I've got mine, we'll agree to disagree. And with that, folks, you've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I'm your host, Dr. Nasir. If you haven't done so already and we've earned it, we'd love for you to subscribe to the channel, like, share, and follow us. Y'all know what to do. Check out our other video links above and below. I'll leave you with my final thought, which is, when you're right, you're right. And when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.